Atomic Habits. You've read this book.
It was a book that I engulfed myself in.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that book. The big takeaways for me is that when we look at doing something like this, if it's a new behavior, the success rate on creating a new behavior is actually tremendously low. And I think most people know that when they look at like January resolutions and things like this.
You just searched it up, did you not? Did you catch the success rate of people?
I think it was something like 76% of people fail. I'm not sure the accuracy of those.
That sounds ballpark. I think most people would agree with when they start a new habit, it's got a low success chance.
And then starting 2 habits at one time,
it dials it down to like less than 90%.
Yeah, like 90% of people fail. I think it's 30-some% of the pie that you already have for success. Only 30% of those people will be successful if they're taking on 2 behaviors instead of 1.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we can agree that taking on one thing at first is a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
So that one thing for me, I would start thinking about the habit itself rather than the logistics of what that actually is.
Mm-hmm.
So getting into said book, when we start talking Atomic Habits, it really talks about the 4 parts of forming a habit. It talks about cue, craving, response, and reward. So understanding setting this up for yourself is going to set you up for success is a huge win for me. Like if I have a client that's taking that step, I know that they're going to be much further along the board. So I have a current client that he loves white wine. And one step that he took to strategize around his own behavior is to move it out of areas that are easy to access.
Yeah.
Because he has a goal of losing a significant amount of weight. He has to be a particular weight so that he can get a type of hernia surgery that they actually kind of weave together your own tissues to block off the hernia instead of putting in the mesh.
Yeah.
So
removing the wine out of the area, where would that fall in regards to cue, craving, response?
So I think that gets right to the beginning of the chain. So, cue, it's like, okay, so what's the thing that's going to kind of let me know that I need to do something? So for him, it was, well, when I'm leaving the office, I have the fridge there and I can just grab a bottle.
Mm-hmm.
So the cue would be, I see the fridge. Now when he sees the fridge, it has water in it.
Yeah.
So the cue may give him the craving, but he actually can't take the response of actually having his glass of wine. So the reward of I feel relaxed when I drink wine is not there.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be an example of taking steps to avoid a negative behavior.
Yeah. It's removing the resistance it's making it harder to achieve or to obtain.
Right. But then if you look at like good research out of the UK, they talk about intention in habit forming, where they had a control group. They had a group where they went through a presentation on the reasons to exercise, and then they had a third one where they went through that presentation, and they had them sit down and write an intention. So writing down, okay, I plan to exercise this day, and this day, this coming week. 96% of those people versus the control group was something just over 10%, and the second group was something just over, I think, 20%. But 90% of the people that set an intention and started talking about the logistics of when they would exercise actually did it.
Mm-hmm.
So creating the cue was quite literally intention for them.
Yeah, which is interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, even there's some research around too. Just asking somebody if they're going to vote increases their chances of voting like drastically.
Yeah, it just puts it on their plate.
So yeah, I find that to be a really interesting thing. But as we get into Atomic Habits, creating the cue for yourself of this is when I'm going to X is a really big thing. So even having something set forward, like, well, I'm going to exercise more. It's like, what's the cue? Well, I am going to go for a walk 4 nights of the week after I eat dinner. That would be much stronger than I want to walk 4 times this week.
Mm-hmm.
Because all of a sudden it becomes reality, and that intentionality really improves chances.
Yeah, like you're putting more details, more strategy into it, the more it's more of an investment overall.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, this book was... So I listened to the 20-minute summary of the book just to take a crash course on it. And I've talked a lot about habits before. To me, it's funny. I don't think people think about strategizing habits at all, because this is essentially breaking down your habit into a strategy so you can be successful. I think a lot of people just take I want the habit of waking up at 5 a.m. in the morning. So I'm going to set my alarm at 5 a.m. But then there's so many barriers to entry of like, well, I can hit the snooze. I can just not, like, I can forget to set it. I can sleep through it. You can do all these things that can hold you back from it. So having this strategy, this essential, like, habitual loop of cue, craving, response, reward, I don't think a lot of people strategize their habits.
Well, and that's why it's important to talk about. Because habit forming isn't easy. And research will tell us that if the challenge in changing is greater than the challenge of staying the same, likely it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, to that point, and then that's reducing the resistance and increasing the ease of access, removing the wine from the fridge and putting water in the fridge instead. Even for myself, I know I like candy. I like candy at the end of the night, right?
yeah.
And I think I told you this because I enjoy playing a game at the end of the night. I bought a bag of candy, and I didn't actually, normally what I do, just habitually, I separate the candy into different Tupperware containers, and that limits my candy intake. I'm only allowed so much sugar because I just grab one Tupperware container, and I'm like, well, I'm only allowed the one, and I've told myself that. I didn't have time to separate the bag, so I just grabbed the bag and came upstairs because I was in a rush, crushed the whole bag. Very unusual for me. I brought the bag down for Diane, and she was like, holy crap, did you eat that whole bag of candy? And I was like, oh yeah, I guess I did, whoops. Like, but it was just because it was so easily accessible, and I didn't enact that like long-term habit that I had of portioning myself out, like that portion control that I've just kind of always done naturally, just because I knew it was good for me.
Yeah. Well, and Sarah does this really well. Like, people often ask, does your wife work out? And I'm like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we're very different in a lot of ways, which is cool because we get to kind of fill each other's gaps. Her filling my gaps more than me filling hers. She's pretty complete. But she does this thing where, like, let's say she's coming up. We watched Survivor before bed. We're actually on season 40. It took us a year and a half, but we've watched all of them. Yeah.
Nice.
But she came upstairs last night with some popcorn, and she came up with a single bowl for me. Like, this is what you get. She doesn't bring the bag. Yeah. And it's really interesting because she has some habits and behaviors that, you know, people would see her, and she's always been very petite. And, you know, you see these things on magazine covers like, oh, they starve themselves to be so small. No, some people are kind of built like that. Like, if I don't exercise, I get small. So Sarah, when she's done, I'm like, hey, do you want a bite of this? She's like, I'm full. And she's not starving herself. She's like, no, I'm just full. She recognizes that. And she has these behaviors where it's like, yeah, here is the bowl of popcorn. I'm not bringing the bag. I don't need the whole bag.
Would you say she's full, or sometimes she's just satisfied? Two different things.
Yeah, so for her, once she has eaten what she is satisfied with, like, she's done.
She attributes that with being full maybe too.
That's right. Like, for her, I think it's one and the same.
Yeah.
But again, it's a very healthy thing, and she really doesn't exercise with me almost ever. I always thought that I needed somebody that would be really similar to me and want to exercise all the time. But she's like, no, go do you. Have your time. Yeah. And that's actually been huge. I really appreciate that about her. So.
I'm similar to her in regards to my approach with food, that I will get, as soon as I'm satisfied, I'll stop eating. But that's counterproductive to what I want, because I've always wanted to put on more size, more muscle. But when I'm done eating, I'm like, no, I'm full. I'm satisfied, and I'm not one to force the food down after the fact. Right. So it's always kind of played against me. But it's also kept me like relatively a healthy weight, I guess.
Well, if you're nice and lean, you can be a fitness influencer, right?
Yeah, I can.